About another minute to see who else hops on for a second. Or is the format different in my about another minute to see who else hops on for a second. Thank you. And if you're on YouTube watching us live, we will start in just a minute. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Maurice Sweeney, Chief Equity Officer here in Chicago Public Schools. Thank you all for joining us, and I want to turn it over to whoever's on the team is to give some additional clarity around interpretations.
Thanks, Dr. Sweeney. Para todos los que están escuchando, si necesitan traducción, hay un icono en la parte de abajo de su pantalla que tiene un globo que dice Interpretation. Si hace clic en el encillo, pueden elegir el lenguaje que prefieren y pueden escuchar este evento en español. Dr. Sweeney, floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening here in Chicago Public Schools. Welcome to our Capital Improvement and Investment session. I've been the Chief Equity Officer here now for 2.5 years. I'm celebrating my 20th year in education, and so I'm personally thankful and grateful for the opportunity to serve in this role and to continue to advance equity in Chicago Public Schools. So thank you all for joining us. There will be some time for a Q&A and a whole bunch of other things, but we really have three central objectives. One is just to recap the FY21 capital planning process and budget. Essentially, what do we do? How do we allocate money? And how do we make decisions on where do we do our capital investments across the city of Chicago? Second is to continuously build on the community's understanding about, what is the planning process. So we hope that we will continue to provide clarity for you all and give you an opportunity to continue to ask us questions. And then finally, consult with families and communities to collect feedback. So we know some of you are watching on YouTube, some of you are here within in this space with us. A couple of questions to think about is which are the most important priorities for you and your community. Now, at some point, one of our directors, Vinny Dye, is going to describe to you the areas or the important areas for capital investments. And we want to give people an opportunity to just think about what's important for them and for you all in your communities. And then the secondly is how do we continue to inform this capital planning process? In what ways do we need to continue to disseminate information? How do we continue to keep people informed throughout the process? So thank you for coming to listen and learn with us. And we hope that you find this experience valuable, and we look forward to your feedback. Next slide. So you heard the voice of Adrian Segura in the back. He is our Deputy Chief of Family and Community Engagement. I told you who I am. Vinny Dye is Director of Capital Operations, and Ivan Hansen is the Executive Director of Capital Planning and Construction. So thank you again. Next. And we want to give a special shout out to all the people who have been informing this process last year and this year. We appreciate everyone's opportunity to give us feedback. What we did was we took the presentation, we built it out, we brought it in front of some community stakeholders and community organizations to make sure we have the right information in front of you. They gave us a lot of feedback, and we continue to tweak the information as we go along. So thank you to all of those groups and folks. In the CPS 5-year vision, we made a commitment to integrity where we said we respect families and communities and we will listen to their feedback in order to build trust. And so the purpose of the capital planning sessions is to expand information around the city around how do we prioritize need and how do we allocate those funds. The definition for equity is in our CPS 5-year vision and also in our CPS Equity Framework that essentially says we will provide the necessary resources and opportunity for young people, and we will continue to figure that out in an equitable way. This is my favorite slide of all slides. It is a CPS approach to equity in our CPS Equity Framework. And you can find our CPS Equity Framework at equity.cps.edu. Within this framework, we say that we have to take a targeted universalism approach. In other words, what does it take for any student group within this organization to get to the goal? Whether it's reading, whether the goal is graduation, whether the goal is providing a high quality education in a clean, bright, and beautiful building. How do we do that equitably? We say we have to talk about the right things and address our mindsets, liberatory thinking, inclusive partnerships. This is an example of that, of really engaging community folks and give them an opportunity to weigh in. Resource equity, we will describe the process for doing the allocation, and fair policies and systems. How do we make sure that these systems benefit all? So with that, we have applied this approach throughout the process, and you'll be able to see how some of this unfolds along the way. Today, we will consult with you. In other words, there'll be some opportunity to ask questions. We will keep you informed. We will make sure that we listen, and we hope that you find this as a productive session. And I want to just take us way back, or maybe not as way back as I'm thinking, but people continue to ask, and it's the right question of how does CPS get its funding? It's about half local, some money from the state and some money from the federal government. About 52% local funding. We do get some funding from the federal government and from our state. And so what we do is we take that money and we pay funds that go directly to schools, centering on people, time, and money. There's that inward sliver of like, how do we make sure we are staffing central office to meet the needs and the supportive structures of all of our community and students. And then finally, also to make sure that we're paying our pension and paying off debt, because we want to make sure that people have their needs met in retirement after investing a lot of time within the district. Here's our timeline. So back in January, myself and the folks who I introduced you to, we sat around a virtual table and we talked about what did we learn about the capital planning process last year and how do we want to make sure that it's designed well this year to keep people informed about what does it mean to do the capital investment work that Executive Director, Mr. Ivy Hansen, is going to describe for us. We did some initial stakeholder groups. We really like to sort of slow down and say, is this the right information? Are we providing greater clarity for folks as they ask, about the capital budget every year? And then here we are in May having these sessions. Afterward, we take that information back. We look at how much money we have and we determine using the equity index and some other prioritization factors to figure it out. And we will describe more about what that is. We go back to the board and say, hey, this is what we think for review. And then we make a vote in July. So the same process last year is the same this year. And so with that, I will get ready to turn it over to one of our teammates. I think this is Ivan up next to just describe the work of the capital planning session. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Doc Sweeney, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We are here today in an effort for increased transparency in the capital planning process. And this is work in progress, and we know it's not perfect, but CPS is committed to building on this process. Our primary goals today are to recap the FY21 capital plan, to provide information and build a deeper understanding about our capital planning process, seek input from you and the community on the capital budget priorities, and how CPS can continue to improve community engagement. Our topics for discussion are the CPS building portfolio, understanding CPS budgets, capital planning approach, the equity index factors, and the capital budget categories. There will also be a survey link provided at the end of this presentation, which we encourage you all to participate in. The CPS facility portfolio is large, and our average age facility is 81 years old, and our oldest facility is 147. We maintain over 62 million square feet. And to put that in perspective, that would be the equivalent of 14 Sears Towers. Many years of budgetary constraints has led to a large backlog of deferred needs. The total district need is over $3 billion, and that's just to bring all facilities to a state of good repair. The cost to repair CPS buildings has far exceeded what CPS has historically been able to afford. Because of this, prioritization of capital needs is critical, and CPS values your input in this process. CPS budgets are classified into three types: capital, operating, and debt. Operating is the day-to-day school operations. All the money in CPS's operating budget is used to pay personnel costs such as salaries and benefits, and non-personnel costs such as food, cleaning, utilities, instructional supplies, building supplies, and software. Debt is the funds allocated to make annual payments on our bonds and other debt payments. Capital, what we will be discussing today, represents the amount of funds allocated for long-term investments in our school facilities, including building construction renovations and infrastructure-based technology like high-speed internet. Again, today we're focusing on the capital budget. The question has come up continually in the difference between capital and operating funds. Capital, managed by us, the Planning and Capital Department, the projects typically include major renovations such as roof replacements or major interior renovations, MEP projects that have long durations for a few months to years. Operating and maintenance is managed by the CPS Facilities Department, which is separate from the Capital Department. And the projects include custodial, landscaping, snow removal, and basic facility upkeep. Those durations can go from a few hours to only a few days. Since CPS cannot afford to fund all deferred maintenance needs and repairs to the capital program, CPS buildings are still maintained through the facilities team. There is a very close collaboration between CPS Capital and Facilities Departments to address all building needs, and we meet weekly. During this presentation, we are focusing on the capital portion of the CPS budget. We are talking about the difference between repairs that cost thousands versus replacements that could cost millions of dollars. For example, air conditioning. The facilities department would be responsible for maintaining existing window air conditioning units and making all necessary repairs or replacements as required. Whereas the capital department would be responsible for replacing or upgrading the entire air conditioning system. Roofs is another example. Facilities would do some roof patching where a full roof replacement would be done by capital. Here's a look at the capital budget over the past 6 fiscal years, and you can see the ebbs and flows, which makes developing a long-range capital plan extremely difficult. While the needs continue to be significant and consistent, the funding varies on an annual basis. Remember, our facility need is over $3 billion, which exceeds our annual funding levels. This is why prioritization process is extremely critical, and your input is not only welcome, but necessary. Over the next few slides, I'll be recapping the FY21 capital budget categories. Many of these categories will remain the same for the upcoming capital planning year. However, 2 items to note. We heard from the community and continue to prioritize critical capital needs and focus on keeping buildings warm, safe, and dry. This includes roof and envelope needs, and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing needs. And based on what we heard from the community during last year's capital planning process and outreach, bathrooms and parking lots were 2 new categories added into the FY21 capital plan. In addition, CPS remains committed to investing in building accessibility program, programmatic upgrades, including modernization of classrooms to provide 21st century learning environments, site improvements, such as new playgrounds and turf fields, and infrastructure for IT and safety and security. The video will be going into much more detail on many of these categories later in the presentation, including the new priorities that CPS will be considering for the FY22 year. Also, similar to last year, CPS will be requesting your input via survey on the budget categories to help us prioritize capital critical needs across the portfolio. On the screen is a summary of the FY21 capital budget. Last year, the board approved the capital plan of $653 million. What's important to recognize is that although $653 million was approved, nearly $300 million was committed for priorities such as pre-K expansion, science lab upgrades. The remaining amount is prioritized for critical capital needs. I will now invite Ada back to speak on the equity index and how to inform the capital project selection and prioritization.
Thank you, Ivan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Your feedback is really essential to making progress on resource equity for and with our students and families. Like Ivan shared, some of the slides I'm going to walk through now may look familiar if you joined our community engagement spaces last year. Just to give some framing around the equity index. The equity index is a tool that we're designing together to be used for project prioritization to make sure we are aligning critical need and resource allocation. So the index is composed of community factors to acknowledge that students interact with their school community, surrounding community, and the community where they live. The index also takes into account demographic factors, acknowledging that as a city, we are segregated. So how do we take into account some of the demographics in order to respond to that critical need and those opportunity gaps? And it also takes into account historical investment factors to make sure we're looking at how resources have been allocated in the past to learn from those practices and change allocation decisions that need to be changed to better meet the needs of communities that haven't received as much resource allocation as they need to in order to achieve equitable outcomes. So the factors highlighted here specifically under each of these three categories will remain in the version we'll use for this current budget year to allow us to track progress on resource equity over time. We do need to hear from you on whether these align with your priorities to help us determine the weighting of the data and whether new factors are needed. So the survey that Ivan highlighted is really, really important for giving us that data and allowing us to understand your feedback and helping us make those decisions. So based on your feedback last year, we just wanted to highlight here, you'll note here on the bottom left, this dashed box here, highlighting students experiencing homelessness. This is a factor, an indicator that was added based on your feedback from last year, where you told us that we need to prioritize the critical needs of this student group because these are school communities that are serving a large percentage of students experiencing homelessness, have larger opportunity gaps that we also need to be considering when making these resource allocation decisions. If we go to the next slide, I'll just do a brief walkthrough of some of the different factors. Next slide, thank you. So here are the community factors in the current draft. So you'll see them here, the hardship index score, which utilizes data from the index that was developed to sum up the opportunity gaps and hardship by Chicago community. So we use that data to understand where our students are situated based on the community that they live in. So we know that not every student goes to their neighborhood school. So we roll up that data to the school community level to factor into this index factor. We also look at whether at the students attending a school and whether or not they reside in Invest Southwest areas. So Invest Southwest areas have been identified as high priority for resource equity in the city. So we're trying to make sure that we are aligned in responding to the needs of those communities and the students and families that live in those communities. The community life expectancy here also takes into account some of what I mentioned before, right? So we know that the school is just part of the systems that students experience. We know there's the surrounding school community and the communities that they live in. So quality of life factors like life expectancy are really important in that model. And students experiencing homelessness, like I highlighted before. If we go into the next slide, we see here the different demographic factors and historical capital funding factors. So we often use these data, and we have this data at the school level to try to understand where our students are experiencing more economic disadvantage, where we should be providing more support because there are a higher percentage of students with individualized education plans, where there are students who are in learning English as a second language or as third, fourth language, possibly. And then historical capital funding in reference to that acknowledgement of how has resource allocation been made over the past 10 years in capital funding and in TIF funding for the past 20 years. So if we go to the next slide, thank you. So just to highlight here how your feedback is already leading to change in decisions based on inclusive partnerships and for equity. Here is a map of the fiscal year 21 capital projects overlaid against the UIC hardship index score for the different Chicago communities. So what you'll see here in the map on the right is the higher the score, the darker the blue. And what that signifies is the higher opportunity gaps or hardship. And Dr. Sweeney and Ivan, please do chime in here with any other learnings we would like to highlight. But just what I wanted to note here is in fiscal year 21, CPS utilized the equity index as well as facility condition index data to prioritize projects across the city. And you can see here that the projects that were prioritized are aligned with the areas of hardship based on that data of the city and Chicago data that tells us where there's more opportunity gaps and based on your feedback. So I will now turn it over to our Executive Director of Capital Planning and Construction, Ivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ada. Our capital planning approach is outlined here, but it's important to note that the annual capital plan is based on available funding. As you saw in an earlier slide, this can vary greatly from year to year, which makes planning difficult. Our building needs are based on the most recent facilities condition assessment, which was completed this year and will be available on cps.edu later this month. CPS's portfolio is very large and the backlog of building needs is significant. This, coupled with continued budget constraints, necessitates a needs-based prioritization approach, focusing on priority capital needs and keeping buildings warm, safe, and dry. We must maintain a data-driven approach that allows for equitable allocation of capital funds while also aligning with the district's educational goals and initiatives. In FY21, we have made enhancements to this process and will continue to do so in FY22. There is a no one-size-fits-all approach to capital planning, and we understand that the current process isn't perfect. However, CPS is committed to improving this process continuously and incorporating public feedback like these meetings today. Our approach this year follows the FY21 methodology for capital budget categories, but we're also making several process enhancements. Most notably, this year's process included data from the updated facilities assessments. We also remain committed to increasing transparency and public outreach, and we continue to work with Dr. Sweeney's group, who guides us to increase community engagement in the overall capital planning process. And today is a direct result of this partnership. We encourage everyone today to participate in the survey after the presentation to provide additional feedback and suggestions. We have completed a new round of facility condition assessments in all CPS owned and operated facilities. The previous facilities condition assessment was completed in 2015. I'd like to make a few notes and highlights of the facility condition assessments. These are visual inspections only of the building systems. It is not destructive. Sample reports you can see here include a rank and quantity for all assessed items at each CPS operated facility. A separate assessment landing page on cps.edu will be out later this month. Prioritization of critical capital needs, roof, windows, MEP, is a process of systems that are dynamic and constantly changing. For example, a system can change significantly from one assessment to another. This can be driven by a number of factors, including weather, accelerated deterioration, and deferred maintenance, and recent investments. I will now turn it over to Vinny to go into more detail on our budget categories for FY22. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Shown here are the 10 proposed priority capital budget categories that CPS is reviewing for the FY22 capital plan. Many of the budget categories from FY21 will be made for FY22. Based on additional public feedback we received and internal discussions, we are proposing to add 2 more categories to the FY22 capital planning process. These 2 categories include, as you see here, the student recreation and athletic resources, as well as modular refurbishment, which will renovate or replace or remove existing modular buildings across the current portfolio. Public feedback is critical to this process, and we are requesting your input on informing the prioritization of these capital budget categories via the survey that can be taken at cps.edu/capital survey 2021. In this section of the presentation, we'll spend a few minutes walking you through and explaining each of the capital budget categories. We'll spend some provide some high-level examples of the types of improvements, the scope, the schedule, and then highlight some of the impacts to students within each budget category and share some photos, as we truly believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here we have our ADA investment strategy. And so before we dive into the other categories, we wanted to highlight that accessibility remains a critical capital priority to CPS. And continuing in FY22, CPS will continue to support the long-range initiative to make all CPS campuses more accessible. This includes working closely with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities to develop a long-term ADA capital investment strategy. This is an investment that will spend $100 million over a 5-year period. At a minimum, the investment will create an accessible route from the parking lot to the main floor of the main campus, and improvements could include one or more of the following. Things like the accessible parking lot, accessible entrance, an accessible route to the first floor and the main office, as well as accessible public restrooms. And that would be for 1 girls, 1 boys, and a unisex toilet for each school. This next category, roof and envelope needs. This was one of the ones we heard from you last year that was of a high priority, as it should be. It includes our roof, windows, and exterior masonry, all directly affecting our ability to provide warm, safe, and dry facilities to our students, staff, and communities. Water infiltration leading to these types of needs can come from roof, windows that are past their useful life, or damage to the masonry from the many freeze-thaw cycles that we experience here in Chicago, as you see in the picture on the top right. These are generally large, complex projects that are phased over 1 to 2 years, with the bulk of the exterior and interior work completed over summer breaks. Due to budget constraints, we are not able to address every roof envelope in the district. However, we work very closely with the facilities team to repair and/or stabilize these issues until they can be renovated or replaced, so as to minimize the impact on our students, staff in the classrooms. The next category, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing needs. These systems control the indoor environment in our buildings and focus on core mechanical systems, essentially heating and cooling of the buildings and associated electrical and plumbing infrastructure. With an average building age of 80 years, a lot of this infrastructure is original to the building. If one or more of these systems or equipment is obsolete and not working, it can cause potential air quality issues for the building, which come at a risk of impacting the health and wellness of our students and staff. Each building systems presents its own set of challenges when planning an upgrade or replacement, which with these projects taking generally about 2 years to complete. Fixing these systems, though, helps us to provide learning environments that are safe, healthy, and comfortable to our students and staff. So before we go to the next category, I want to address something that I'm sure is on everyone's mind. What about inside of my school, my classroom, or my office? So interior finishes such as painting of walls, repairing floors is not listed as a dedicated category. However, these items are often addressed as part of a larger capital project. For example, doing a roof or window replacement Finishes that were damaged due to water infiltration would be repaired and funded as part of the larger project. On some projects, this could include addressing the finishes for entire classrooms and/or corridors, depending on the individual needs of the schools. We know that interior finishes are important and provide a sense of pride in our schools for our students, staff, and community. This next category, restroom upgrades, is new in the FY21 budget based on the community engagement that we heard from you on FY22. Currently, the day-to-day repairs for use and functionality of the restrooms are performed by the facilities department on an ongoing basis. But the capital department, as part of this bucket that was approved for FY21, will be doing major bathroom renovations, as CPS has more than 5,000 student restrooms. So this is a subject we hear a lot about from the local school representation, such as the parents, engineers, and staff, as well as the students. This category, as we spoke about, goes beyond just the basic repairs that the facilities teams would do to provide major renovations for things like hands-free faucets, automatic soap dispensers, toilets with motion detectors to help improve sanitation. Hand in hand with the sanitation would be upgrades for student safety. A renovation might include features like enhanced hands-free lighting or open entryway, or tamper-resistant fixtures and graffiti-resistant partitions. Another benefit from this type of project would be conservation. So we could utilize low-flow pressure-assisted toilets to reduce water usage and alleviate plumbing backups. A renovation would provide these benefits, but also include renovation to the infrastructure. So we would upgrade the plumbing, the piping, the lighting, as well as prepping and painting of the walls and floors. And it would also include some accessibility portions. The restrooms in our schools, we know, make a statement to our students and staff. Improving their appearance can have a positive impact on student behavior and faculty morale. And we heard you last year, and it is included in the FY21 plan, and we plan to keep it in for FY22. So the next category is programmatic investments. Programmatic investments are made to modernize classrooms to provide a 21st century learning environment. Since 2011, the district has focused on strengthening neighborhood schools with high quality academic programming. In last year's academic program focus request for proposals, or the RFP, schools were able to submit proposals requesting the addition of specific academic programs in their schools. The district seeks to maintain integrity in district decision-making and provide even greater transparency and clarity in how academic programs are added to schools, and to improve the equity of access to high-quality academic programming across the district. This process is managed by the Office of Innovation and Incubation. Projects in this category include renovated or new classrooms to support various district-led initiatives like the pre-K expansion. It could also include new programs to a school like an arts program, dance, STEM, STEAM, IB, and many more. This next category is overcrowding relief. The district's overall building utilization average is nearly 70%. This category, however, acknowledges that there are occasionally some buildings within the district that cannot efficiently serve their enrolled population due to space pressures, and they require relief by way of new capacity or capacity expansion. Depending on the need, this may include interior renovation, lease space build out, new addition to the building, or a new modular building, or in some cases, a new school. This next category, IT and security. Here, for today, we're focusing on the IT in our facilities, specifically to improve internet connectivity by building and repairing network infrastructure in our facilities across the district. Security. This category seeks to support student safety at every school, and funds are allocated for new security equipment, including cameras, intercoms, phones, alarm systems, and modernized screening equipment. These next couple categories focus on exterior site improvements. These usually take about 6 months to a year to complete, this one being playground renovations. The primary focus for playground upgrades includes ensuring that students and community users have a safe play area. These improvements can include new equipment for playgrounds for 2 to 5-year-olds or 5 to 12-year-olds, including new accessible surfaces, so we would be getting rid of all the wood chips. And although the facilities and capital team continue to repair and maintain our existing playgrounds, there are many cases where playgrounds are outdated or have exceeded their useful life and require full replacement. On some of these projects, we partner with the Department of Water Management and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. This has been a good partnership where CPS gets the benefit of supplemental funding, a new outdoor space, and the community benefits from the additional stormwater retention as a result of these projects. The next category, parking lot repairs and/or replacements. Again, this category is new to the FY21 budget and one that we heard from you last year. So if you have driven or walked through some of our parking lots of our schools, you have possibly seen the need for parking lot repairs and/or replacements. Currently, or prior to this year, the repairs were primarily addressed either by the facilities department for day-to-day maintenance or emergency issues, or as buildings and accessibility code-driven modifications were included in larger capital projects. So this category, as we talked about, is a specific category that goes beyond parking lot repairs to major parking lot renovation and/or replacement. And these parking lot projects are large dollar volume projects because they include code compliance and ordinances that we have to comply with, as well as the landscaping and stormwater retention, to name a few. And these items often come at a very high price. Thus is why we wanted to have this category to have its own bucket. So based on public feedback, this was added to the FY21 capital plan, and we plan to keep it in the FY22 capital plan. Earlier, on the earlier slide, you saw there were 2 new categories. This is the first one. The district this year seeks to prioritize student recreation and athletic resources as its own category. When we talk about student recreation and athletic resources, we are alluding to stadiums, athletic fields, and natatoriums or swimming pools and the related facilities to these items. For reference, CPS owns 7 stadiums throughout the city. They are Eckersall, Gately, Hanson, Lane, Rockney, Stagg, and Winnemac stadiums. Fall sports at these stadiums include football and boys soccer. Spring sports include girls soccer, track and field, and lacrosse. No doubt many of you, myself included, have fond memories of attending or participating in these types of events at the stadiums. Our natatoriums or swimming pool facilities they range in size and are located at elementary and high schools throughout the district. Our current portfolio includes approximately 80 pools. Of these, there are several that are not operational or have been decommissioned. The non-operational pools range in need from minor repairs, such as a pool pump, to requiring major renovation or full gut rehabs. These pools are used by CPS students and aquatic teams, the Chicago Park District, and various other CPS partners for educational, competitive, and recreational events. CPS operates various stadiums and athletic fields throughout the district, and in a typical school year, these stadiums hold over 600 athletic events attended by over 16,000 CPS students and spectators. In addition to regular scheduled CPS events, CPS stadiums also serve as site hosts for the Chicago Public League competitions and Illinois High School Association events such as playoffs and tournaments. Fully functional athletic resources such as stadiums, athletic fields, and natatoriums provide CPS students with the resources and support for physical health and wellness, and this can have a significant impact on a student's ability to achieve academic success. Upgrading these antiquated facilities is a priority for CPS beyond just routine maintenance. This category will provide renovations to student locker rooms and public restrooms, existing running tracks and athletic fields, our pools or natatoriums, the spectator seating and concession stands, etc. These renovations would also include the upgrades to much needed infrastructure such as our mechanical systems, the plumbing, the piping, and then as well as the interior and exterior lighting and any structural concerns that would be brought forward, as well as making our stadiums fully ADA accessible. One example of how CPS is prioritizing investments in student recreational facilities is the anticipated Eckersall Stadium renovation. This project is scheduled to be bid this fall with construction beginning in 2022. With your input, we seek to do much more. This next category is the second new potential category for the FY22 budget, the modular refurbishment program. What do we mean by modular? Modular buildings are commonly built on a fixed foundation with walls, roof, and or floors typically constructed off-site and assembled on delivery. Because of this, modular buildings can sometimes be moved or transported either as a unit or in sections. These buildings are seen in various sizes or the number of classrooms. Most common sizes are 2, 4, 6, or 8 classrooms. In recent years, CPS has been working with various vendors to identify more sustainable and more permanent material solution for the construction of these types of buildings. Currently, CPS modular buildings we have modular buildings at nearly 60 campuses that house approximately 350 classrooms. Over the years, modular buildings have been added across the CPS portfolio to address various needs, including relieving overcrowding by providing additional classrooms, adding these for dedicated driver's ed facilities, and more recently to support the CPS initiative to expand early childhood or pre-K. In coordination with the schools, the chief of schools, and the Office of Portfolio, the proposed strategy would include a campus-by-campus analysis to review how schools are utilizing these modular buildings. CPS will review each campus for the following potential actions. Assessing the age and condition of all the existing systems in those modulars, including the roof, wall, the finishing, and the MEP. We would then develop a list of repairs, if any are needed, to bring the existing modular up to a state of good condition, or based on age, condition, and need, evaluate if the modular should be replaced or potentially removed entirely. Now, that was a lot of information, and I definitely appreciate your attention. So these are the 10 categories that we are seeking feedback on via the survey that is again at cps.edu/capital survey 2021. The survey you take will help inform the final categories for the FY22 plan. Again, thank you so much for your participation in this meeting today, and I'll turn it over to Adrian now, I think. Or see Dr. Sweeney.
Hey, Vinny. So we did receive quite a few questions from folks in advance, and also I've noticed a few people taking advantage of the Q&A. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we received in advance of today's session and also make our way through the Q&A. For the first question that we've got here, I think it's for Ivan and team. How much money is CPS expecting for the FY22 budget?
Thanks, Adrian. Yes, I'll take that question. So the FY22 capital plan is intended to continue to build on the multi-year $758 million investment, including outside funding, made in the FY21 capital plan. We intend to target investment of about $550 million for the FY22 capital plan. How it's determined, as we talked earlier, there's the different types of funding that we've identified at CPS. We work with our finance and budget teams just to look at what other obligations that we have and see what number is feasible within the budget.
Thanks. And then this next question is, how is the facility quality index determined?
So the facility condition index is used, one of the key factors that we use in determining how the district prioritizes projects. So CPS has historically categorized projects, or prioritized projects, I should say, by building needs. And these needs are based on the facility assessment or the facility condition index. The facility needs priorities are then defined as defined, I should say, in the educational facilities master plan, and is listed in the presentation earlier. So CPS is seeking public input on the prioritization of the facility needs categories and will incorporate into the project prioritization. The Chicago Public School Systems and the Capital Planning Department has recently completed the new round of facility assessments for the 2019-2020 school year. And the previous facility condition assessment was completed in 2014-2015. So this is a definite welcome addition to the way we do our prioritization. And you will, I believe I mentioned earlier that will be posted on the website later this month. So a few points to note about that new assessment is that the facility condition assessment, I think he talked about it being a visual inspection. So it's a visual inspection of all the building systems. It's not a destructive testing type of assessment. Sample reports include a rank and quantity for all assessed items for each CPS facility. And these separate assessments will be posted again later this month on its own landing page, which we're building out now for each school. So you'll be able to go there and see the needs for your particular school. Prioritization, though, of critical capital needs, again, is a process. And since systems are dynamic and they are changing constantly, based on maintenance, based on weather. So these systems could either accelerate, the deterioration could accelerate or deteriorate. Accelerate the deterioration is what I want to say. And so when we look at prioritizing these, a big portion of that is adding the equity index in there. So we look at the facility condition index, and then we take into account the equity index, and that is how we prioritize the project. So those two factors, in alignment with the district's academic initiatives, is how we prioritize projects.
Thanks, Vinny, for that overview. Is there a list of priority needs by school that the capital team keeps?
Sure, yeah, you want to take that?
So again, the condition for each particular school is in the assessment for that particular school. So if you are interested in looking at what the particular needs are for a school, any school, that information is going to be housed on that site. So you can see, all of the schools on that landing page, and it will tell you, it will be a link to the full assessments for all of the systems at a particular school.
Thank you. What are the final decision points for picking a capital project?
So, well, based on public input that we're going to receive from the surveys and alignment with the district's academic initiatives and available funding, we'll develop a list of projects recommended for the FY22 budget, and then we'll conduct the public hearings before board approval on the capital project.
Thanks. This next one I think is for Ivan. It's from the Illinois Network of Charter Schools. They asked if charter schools are going to be a part of the FY22 capital plan.
Yeah, so no matter if it's a charter, contract, or CPS district operated school, all critical needs at CPS owned and leased facilities are considered as part of an overall prioritization process.
Thanks. And similarly, but different work stream, I don't know if Ada or Doc Sweeney can chime in on this, but the question is, are charter schools in CPS owned are charter schools a part of the equity index score?
Yes, they are. All CPS operated or connected schools are part of the opportunity index or the equity index score.
Thanks for that. This next one's from Nicole, who's asking if there's a public-facing document or database where they can have access to see the accessibility status of each school. I don't know if that's something Ivan or Vinny want to respond to.
Oh, yeah, you want to take the one there?
Okay. The accessibility level for each school is on each school's website. If they go to the on cps.edu, that information is on the webpage for each school.
You're muted, Adrian. Can't tell if you were.
Yeah, so sorry, I was sifting through some of the other questions that came in through the registration in advance. So this is one, I think it came up last year, and someone talked about this as well, but how does CPS address and prioritize overcrowding relief?
I can take that one. So there's a lot of factors that play into the overcrowding relief, and utilization rates are not the only piece of that. The example would that be schools without boundaries generally don't receive priority over overcrowding investments because they should be able to manage the numbers themselves. So you first need to determine on what the school type is, and then if they are projected to experience that they need to restrict their enrollment to new students. But there's a lot of other things that we look at is if there's a potential, federal dollars, if that's the last resort is to do construction, then we need to look at how that's being funded. If there's local or state revenues to do that. There's a facility houses, citywide programs that can be moved to a nearby facility. Again, if there's boundary changes, but is that feasible? And then that there's different board actions that go into that. So there's just a lot of pieces that go into overcrowding relief prior to getting to construction.
Thanks for that. And can you share the breakdown of the $3 billion in need by school?
the deferred needs for the 3 million. So yeah, I mean, it's essentially, you've got MEP, you've got roofs, facades, and fire alarm systems. It's just a deferred need of general ongoing maintenance. And I'd just like to add, Adrian, if there is a school-specific questions, then definitely please make sure they take the survey so we know which schools that there's specific questions about.
Thanks. This next one's from Matt Major. When the district makes its capital budgeting decisions, is there any information or context taken into account outside of the facility needs analysis and equity analysis?
One of the things that we use when we are developing the facility, we have the facility condition index, we have the equity index, but we also take a look, like we said earlier, we work very closely with the facilities department. So once we have, we are always asking them, I should say, if there are buildings with systems that are critical out there, right? Because again, systems are dynamic. They change from year to year. The assessments take place over a 2-year period. And so something could have changed dramatically. So there are cases where we use technical reports, boots on the ground, and other resources to inform the list based on, live data that is coming into us on the needs of a particular school. So that in that case, it may be that we are spending enormous amount of money to maintain these systems, and as opposed to maintaining them, we try to get them in the capital plan. And that happens frequently because, again, systems change. And in that case, as he asked, it may or may not align with the equity index, but it's a critical facility need for CPS business operations.
Thank you for that, Vinny. This next one's from Darlene, who, I don't know, Ivan, I know that there's an opportunity for folks to talk specifics in their, in the survey that we're gonna send out afterwards. But she's asking about lighting outside of her campus, Johnson College Prep. Is that something that would be covered in the survey, or is that something that falls under a different category?
That could be brought up in the survey. There's another piece that you can add that in. And we can also talk to the facilities department about that.
Great. What's the minimum adequate funding level that CPS required annually for capital?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Adrian?
Yeah, what is the minimum adequate funding level that CPS required annually for capital?
Well, so there's I guess a few different ways to answer that, but with the $3 billion need, there's about a $700 million just to run in place piece of it. That's with no other programmatic investments, with no other of our set aside for accessibility, nothing for restrooms, nothing for fields. That's just for the deferred need. So there is a great need there, but that's just to start tackling or picking away at the $3 billion in deferred.
So along those same lines, what's the optimal budget for the next 5 years?
Optimal, I guess, is it's hard to say, and the reason it's hard to say is that if we were able to get enough the $3 billion, is there the contractors and trades out there to do that work in the time frame we have to get it done? So we are managing with what we have. Is more money needed? Absolutely. But what is feasible in the time frame we have to spend it over a summer, over evenings and weekends to get work done? So we are now able to forecast a little bit, which is huge, and we can start getting actual plans together. So that is a big help.
Fantastic. So with that, if folks, don't have any additional questions, I'll give folks in the group a few more minutes to drop any additional ones that they might have. If not, I am not going to hold people on for the sake of holding people on. So if you have additional questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A now. Okay. On that note, then, if we can go to the next slide. And I see Doc Sweeney. I don't know if you're still here. You want to talk about next steps?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of the questions. I will say I wish I, had $3 billion and much more to solve some of these financial crises that we have. But I do appreciate the facilities assessments and the equity indexing to help make sure that we pay attention to the needs of different communities, especially those that have been historically underserved. So just know we will continue to grapple with all of these issues, and we ask that you please complete the survey. The survey is our way to get closer to different schools. So when Mr. Lean asked about the lighting at Johnson or Jones College, I don't remember which specific school, but I really thought about it's the way Johnson College Prep, it's the way for really capturing what people are thinking based on where they live and where their students go to school. So please, even if you're with us, complete that survey. And if you're not with us, I think we'll flash the link up in a moment. So the next step, we continue to inform people about the capital investment process. What do we do? How do we spend money in Chicago Public Schools? Then we go back with our equity indexing, looking at facilities needs to say, okay, based on these two metrics or these two indicators, here is how we should spend our money to address the critical needs within the district. And also keeping special pots of money on the side for ADA and some other critical investments that we put in our CPS 5-year vision. So we take that information, we come up with a preliminary list. We have conversations as teams, equity team, capital team, facilities, and whoever else needs to be involved in those. We present something to the board, and then it comes up to the board for hearing. So there's still some steps in iteration. This is not the hearing. This is the place for really keeping people informed too. We want to live up to the CPS Equity Framework where we say inclusive partnerships. We're continuing to figure out how to be better at that constantly. And if you're interested in seeing the CPS Equity Framework, equity.cps.edu. Lots of tools there if you want to figure out how to have conversations about race with your friends or in your communities. Find the tools section and see what works for you. And with that, next slide. You can see the survey. It'll be open for maybe about 3 weeks. cps.edu/capital survey 2021. So that's cps.edu capital survey /2021. Instead of writing it down, I always, if you want to take a quick picture of the link so that you have it for later. Ada, our equity data strategist, she's the bomb. She just dropped the link in the chat. And from all of us here at CPS, all of our, thank you for giving us your time this afternoon. There are other sessions and we invite folks to come. So please continue to give your feedback. Enjoy the rest of your day. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't forget, this is when